I worked 30 years as faithful sidekick for Kimasabe. Hunt, fish, make food, sew clothes, sweep up, stay awake all night, listen for enemies for Kimasabe.
A rider in a white hat gallops through a stretch of dusty desert, his voice booming through the static. Hi-yo, Silver! Away. Beside him rides another figure. Quiet, steady, loyal. That was Tonto. To generations of television viewers, he was the loyal native companion of the Lone Ranger, a symbol of courage and simplicity. But behind that iconic image was a story that television never told, a truth that Hollywood preferred to keep buried. The man beneath the costume was Jay Silverheels, the first Native American actor to play a Native American character on television. For millions, he became a household name. His image was printed on cereal boxes, lunch boxes, and Saturday morning screens across America. Yet, for all the fame and applause, Jay carried a private burden. Behind the calm expression and patient nods was a man navigating an industry built on stereotypes, silence, and exclusion. He was paid half of what his white co-star earned. He endured directors who mocked his accent, producers who refused to give him proper dressing rooms, and scripts that reduced his character to broken English. Even the name Tonto, the name that made him famous, carried a hidden insult. In Spanish, it meant fool. Jay knew it, and he could never escape it. In interviews, he would smile and play the part, but off camera, his feelings slipped through in quiet moments. When someone once asked him what he thought of Tonto, he gave a blunt, three-word answer. Tonto is stupid. That short response said everything. His frustration, his pride, and the quiet pain of being seen but never fully heard. Still, Jay Silverheels was not just a man defined by a single role. His life began far from Hollywood, in a small wooden house on a reserve in Ontario, and his path to fame was paved with struggle, resilience, and a fierce sense of identity. Before he became Tonto, he was a son, a soldier, an athlete, and a fighter. His story is not only about how he played a part that made history, but how he spent the rest of his life trying to make sure no one else would be trapped by it. This is the story of Jay Silverheels, the man behind Tonto and the truth that Hollywood tried to hide. Jay Silverheels was not born in Hollywood. He was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, near Hagersville, Ontario. It was a small community in the heart of Canada, but for the Mohawk people who lived there, it was also a place of survival, a reminder of what had been taken and what had to be held on to. Harold was one of at least 10 children packed into a modest wooden house. Life was never easy, and comfort was something his family only heard about, never lived. His father, Alexander George Edwin Smith, was a decorated war hero. He fought in World War I, serving with bravery at the battles of the Somme and Ypres, earning the Military Cross for his service. But when he returned home, the glory faded quickly. Like many Indigenous veterans, he came back to a country that had no place for him. His hearing was gone, his body weakened, and the government that had celebrated his bravery now gave him a disability pension of just $49 a month. Those medals didn't feed the family, and they couldn't buy medicine. Harold grew up watching his father's pride turn into quiet pain. His mother, Mabel Smith, carried the household through sheer will. She was part Mohawk, part Seneca, and when doctors refused to treat Indigenous patients, she turned to the knowledge passed down through generations. Even in those hard years, there were sparks of life that couldn't be dimmed. Harold was quick on his feet from the moment he could walk. By 5, he was already a local favorite in the reserve's lacrosse games, darting across the dirt field with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. As he grew, the world around him was changing in ways that quietly worked against his people. At Six Nations, children were beaten for speaking Mohawk. Some were forced to swallow soap or were strapped with belts if they disobeyed. One of Harold's own sisters was sent away. When she returned, she could barely speak her language. The system had done its job. It had made her afraid of who she was. These experiences weren't isolated. They were the reality of Indigenous families across North America. Government policies banned traditional ceremonies and called Indigenous people lazy or unfit. Officials said they lacked the discipline to compete in the modern world. Those words lingered, shaping how people looked at families like the Smiths and how the Smiths learned to look at themselves. For a young boy like Harold, growing up in that environment meant carrying an invisible weight. The constant message that you didn't belong in your own country. When the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, things went from bad to worse. Harold's family, like so many others, struggled to survive. They eventually moved to Buffalo, New York, chasing whatever work they could find. Harold labored on farms, lifted crates in warehouses, and did anything that paid a few dollars. His father, now nearly deaf and worn down, could barely move without pain. His mother sold or bartered anything of value, even family heirlooms, just to keep food on the table. The government rations they were given were often spoiled. Yet through all that hardship, Harold didn't give up. Poverty for him became a kind of training. It taught him endurance. By 19, he was playing professionally for the Toronto Tecumsehs, a team that toured Canada and the United States. He wasn't alone. His cousins, with nicknames like Porky, Beef, and Chubby, played alongside him. Together, they formed a traveling brotherhood, taking the indigenous game to cities that had never seen it before. Crowds came to watch them play, and newspapers began to talk about the lightning-fast Mohawk from 6 Nations. That's where his famous name was born. One night during a game, Harold outran a defender so quickly that a spectator shouted that his shoes looked like they were made of silver. From then on, he was called Silverheels. It started as a nickname, but it became something more, a symbol of speed, pride, and resilience. Years later, when Hollywood came calling, he'd keep it as his own. But for now, he was just a young man fighting his way out of poverty, using his talent to stay one step ahead of the system that wanted him invisible. Lacrosse gave him a glimpse of what freedom could feel like. What he didn't yet know was that freedom would come at a much higher price, one that fame would never fully repay. By his early 20s, Harold Silverheels Smith had become a name known across the lacrosse world. His speed, agility, and stamina made him a spectacle on the field. Crowds came not just to watch the game, but to watch him, the wiry Mohawk forward who could sprint past 2 defenders and still score. Sports writers described him as the man with lightning feet. But even as the applause grew louder, the world beyond the field reminded him who he was allowed to be and who he wasn't. The 1930s were still the shadow years of the Great Depression. Professional lacrosse paid a few dollars per match, enough to scrape by but never enough to rise. Harold and his teammates spent most of their time traveling, playing in small arenas from Buffalo to Rochester, and sleeping in cheap motels or on buses when they couldn't afford a room. The road became a second home. He saw cities for the first time, met fans who treated him with respect, and others who hurled slurs from the stands. But through it all, he kept running, using his speed as his answer to everything. In the off-season, Harold did whatever work he could find. He hauled lumber, worked on farms, boxed in amateur tournaments, and sometimes even danced in small clubs for a few extra dollars. Every skill was survival. In 1935, he entered the Golden Gloves boxing tournament at Madison Square Garden as a middleweight. Against all odds, he made it to the semifinals, until one crushing punch broke his jaw in 2 places. The pain was unbearable, and it nearly ended his career. He spent weeks on a liquid diet, losing 25 pounds, but he refused to quit. The fight didn't just break his jaw, it proved his toughness. It showed the kind of resilience that would later define him in Hollywood. The injury forced him to take time away from sports, but fate had another path waiting. In 1937, his lacrosse team was invited to play an exhibition series in Los Angeles. It was his first time in California, a city buzzing with new wealth, new faces, and the golden glow of Hollywood. During one of their matches at Gilmore Stadium, a well-known comedian and actor named Joe E. Brown happened to be watching. Brown was impressed by Harold's athleticism and offered him a small part in a movie. It was a stunt role, a diving catch that required multiple takes. But when Harold received his paycheck, it changed everything. That moment planted a seed. Hollywood wasn't just a dream factory, it was an opportunity. Within months, Harold found himself back in Los Angeles, trying to make a name in a business that didn't have a place for people like him. He joined the Screen Actors Guild, adopted the name J. Silverheels, and started working as a stuntman. Hollywood in the 1930s was not a kind place for native or indigenous actors. Casting calls were written for Indian types, and more often than not, studios would paint white actors brown and call it authenticity. When Jay showed up for auditions, he was often asked to remove his shirt so directors could inspect his body. It didn't matter whether he could act, it mattered whether he looked primitive enough. Every audition felt like a test of dignity. Still, Jay endured it. He learned his lines, took direction, and worked twice as hard as anyone else to get noticed. His first credited role came in 1939's Drums Along the Mohawk, directed by John Ford. It was a major studio production, and for the first time, he had a speaking part. He was paid $350 a week, more money than he had ever made in his life. The studio executives liked the name Silverheels. They said it sounded exotic, marketable. To them, it wasn't a Mohawk name, it was branding. But Jay knew what it really meant, a reminder of where he came from and how far he had run to get here. Still, fame didn't come overnight. Throughout the early 1940s, Jay worked as a stunt double and supporting actor in a long list of films.